1977. And I first saw her on move-in day at Westmont College and went, oh, the Lord has spoken. Said, okay, there she is. And she had a broken leg. And her mom had recruited a bunch of other students to help move her up to the third-story dormitory. And I said, that's really great. I don't have to help. She's already got help. Yeah, but I eyeballed her then. A couple weeks later, I was in the lounge at Page Hall at Westmont College, and I was looking in the classified ads. My brother had just purchased a Porsche, and I just was curious as to what they were running. And so she walked down and she says, what are you looking for? I said, I'm going to buy a car. She says, really? What kind of car are you going to buy? I said, I'm going to buy a Porsche. And she goes, sure you are. I said, I'll have it next weekend, and I'll come up and give you a ride. And so my brother was going out of town, and I knew I was going to get the car and come on up. And so I came back up the next weekend with my brother's car. And the license plate on the car, I remember the license plate from 1977, that's a pretty good memory, isn't it? Was 529 SMB, which are my initials. And it's just coincidence. So it's like, this is perfect. I have a Porsche in the parking lot with a personalized license plate. And so I went up, knocked on her door and said, got the car, let's go for a ride. And she immediately turned to her roommate and said, will you come with us? Like I was a stalker or something. She had to bring reinforcements. So we went riding in the Porsche in the hills of Santa Barbara. And I used I got a personalized license plate, made something up for the 529. I don't even remember what it was, some date, birthday or something like that. I wouldn't use birthday. Anyway, but made something up for the 529 and this SMB. So we went driving through the hills, and she had known that I have a Russian background, that my parents were Russian immigrants, so they were curious. They're asking me questions. And so I told them the story, which is fictitious, of my parents coming to the United States. And I said, my parents started their travels while my mom was pregnant with me. And so they were in Iran, and they started traveling west. And they were traveling overland at that point, and they finally made their way to Israel. And my mom was getting closer and closer to her date of delivery, and was getting a little more critical. And they, yeah, you could see it coming, right? And they basically at that point had to stop in Bethlehem. And her friend and Kelly are just going, "Wow, really?" And I'm going, "Yeah, it's amazing." It's a great story. Yeah, and then the night that I was born, there was this star in the sky, and that's when they finally kind of clued in that it was a myth. But I was her secret brother. We had secret brother, secret sister. They kind of hooked you up with an anonymous person who was supposed to do nice things for you over the course of the semester. So the whole time I had been, sending little notes to her and, little candy in the mailbox kind of stuff. And she didn't have any idea. We started dating in January, and the reveal of the secret brother and secret sister was at the end of the year. So half the year I was not her boyfriend, and then half the year I was actually her boyfriend and still being her secret brother. And so it was kind of a fun thing to reveal that at the end of the year, that I was in fact her secret brother, and she didn't know that. But that's kind of how we met at Westmont College, and the rest is history. Wasn't bad that time, huh? She's sensitive about that story. She says, just don't make me look like an idiot. All right, honey. Okay, so I have a statement up on the board, and I want you to, it says marriage is a hard relationship. Agree or disagree? Marriage is a hard relationship. Agree or disagree? Let me hear what your thoughts are about that. My wife and I disagreed on this.
So if you agree, disagree.
Yes.
I think it's challenging, but not hard.
Okay. Challenging but not hard. You want to elaborate?
Hard to me.
So you want it to be hard but not with a negative connotation. Okay.
Yes.
It's challenging but not, okay, great.
I agree.
But it's hard?
I think the oneness that happens is the reason it's hard to say. That person affects you more than anyone else, and you affect that person.
Yeah. I'm in a smart aleck mood today, so don't be offended. I mean, what I wanted to say to her is because of you or him? Is it hard because of you or him? No, okay, good.
Relationships are hard.
Okay.
My relationships with my children is difficult. So I think because we're sinners at heart, saved by grace, we have a difficult time with all relationships. So
Yeah. I think that's probably true. Anything else? Marriage is a hard relationship. Agree or disagree? My wife disagrees with that statement. And I can go either way. I don't know if you want to explain why you disagree or how you disagree, but I like marriage as challenging. I think that's a good way to frame it. Partially, I throw this out here because it seems like what happens is this. We move from this sort of idyllic dating context where everything is natural. Everything just comes naturally. The affection, the pursuit, the feeling, all of that is just like, wow, this is great. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And then marriage comes along and something clicks, some switch is flipped, and it becomes a little more work. I think this is probably a universal, that it becomes difficult. And I've tried to figure out what is that? Why is that? It just doesn't seem right. I mean, I throw this up here and it intuitively, I want to say, no, it can't be. It's got to be this blessed, kind of marvelous, wonderful thing that we enter into. And yet, we often see kind of this sense of, it's a burden. Our culture, and sometimes even ourselves, will belittle the married relationship. You don't want to get married. Your life will end if you get married. So there's this kind of notion out there that it's hard, and you just don't do it. It'll ruin everything. And so there's this sense about marriage that we want it to be good, but it's hard. And so what is that? What is that little thing in there that makes it this hard relationship, or makes it a drudgery, or actually makes it something that we crash onto, the rocks that we crash onto of marriage? What is that? What's that element that changes from that easy, natural dating context to this hard drudgery? And what I've landed on is that it's really kind of this idea of expectations. Expectations. It's kind of summarized in this conversation between dating couples, where there might be a demand made or a request made at some level, and the retort is, oh, no, 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 no. We're not married yet. So there's this line in the sand that says, you can't have that demand, or you can't make that demand until we're married. And then the implication is that now that we're married, okay, you can make that demand. Hey, Max, this mic feels a little hot to me. I don't know, it's just I'm getting a distracting sense of hotness. So expectations are this element that is difficult. The illustration I use is this: if dating is like fishing, all the excitement of finding a spot, baiting the hook, getting ready, and throwing it out there, and snagging the fish and reeling him in. Marriage is like throwing the fish in the bag. It's like all the fun is gone. I've got it. Now it's done. And I know that's a horrible picture, but it seems like sometimes that's what happens. We got to gut it. Yeah, it gets even worse after we get the fish out of the bag, right? So we don't really want to perpetuate that picture of marriage. That's really not what's intended. This is a marvelous, and the epitome of human relationship would be marriage. It would be the place where we find the most satisfaction relationally, the most encouragement. It should be that place of exponentially improving on dating, not somehow going backwards. And I think managing expectations and understanding them, how they work, is part of the key in making this transition. Because when we were dating, I just did all the things that she wanted almost naturally, almost just immediately, because I was chasing. And then once you catch it, it's like, we're done. Bring me a beer. And I don't even drink beer, but bring me a beer anyway. So it's this notion of here's now a relationship where I've got you and I have expectations and you must meet those expectations. So grappling with this idea is an important one. Everybody has expectations. All of you have expectations. Everyone in this room has had extensive training in marriage. Even before you got married, you had extensive training in marriage. And that marriage may have either been by example of a good example, or by absence, or by the example of a bad example, a contrary example. So we all might say this: I want my marriage to be just like my parents' was. It was great. I want to emulate it. Or, I don't want my marriage to be anything like my parents' was. And we just want to reject it. But nonetheless, each of us has had some exposure to the married relationship, and we all have some picture of what it is in ideal form. And I want to chase that. I want that for my relationship and for my marriage. I want to have a healthy, vibrant marriage. So where do expectations fit in this process? How do they work? And so we want to talk a little bit about that. So I want to start with this phrase. In a Christian relationship, in a Christian marriage, you have no rights, only responsibilities. You have no rights, only responsibilities. That probably doesn't sit well with you. I think as Americans, in general, that's a contrary notion to one of our basic foundational national notions. I have rights. And I'm saying in a Christian marriage, no, you don't have any rights. You only have responsibilities. If that scares you, it should cause you to step back and say, why do I want to be married? And the person that I'm marrying, why would I want to be married to them? Because what we're going to establish in this context is that there is a very high level of trust necessary for you to enter into a relationship in which you have no rights. If I have no rights, then I'm abdicating all of that to her. All of those cares and concerns that I have for my own well-being, I'm going to abdicate all of those to her. Those are her responsibilities. It's to watch after my rights. My responsibility would be to watch after her rights. So if we're going to get married, she's got to have a high level of trust that I'm going to take care of her and honor those and watch out for her rights so that she can relax and trust that I will care for her rights. Now, this is a notion that is rooted, I think, in the example that we have of relationship, of pure relationship, and that's Jesus. So the passage that I want you to kind of look at this morning is Philippians chapter 2, which describes the attitude of Jesus Christ. So Philippians chapter 2, starting with verse 1. And I'll read through verse 11. It says, "Therefore, if there is any encouragement in Christ, if there is any consolation of love, if there is any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affection and compassion, make my joy complete by being of the same mind, maintaining the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant and being made in the likeness of men, being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. For this reason also God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee will bow, of those who are in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and that every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father." Now that's an amazing passage of Scripture. But you know, if you've been around the Scriptures long enough, if you've studied Jesus or looked at the life of Jesus, that for Jesus, the epitome of expression, the occupation he used to epitomize relationship is the servant. He came to serve and not be served. And this is the example that he gives of the married relationship, is that it is rooted in this example. And I don't look out for myself, I look out for you before me. Consider your needs more important than my own. Now, this is a direct challenge to this high-level expectation ideal that we have as far as marriage goes. We're not married yet. And so I'm not going to serve you at this level yet because we're not married. But that's really not what we mean. We mean actually that we're going to actually withhold something from you until that period of time. This is really the difficult part of marriage or any relationship, is that we're called to serve others, and we're called to serve others at our own expense. It's a sacrificial giving in relationship. And expectations have the opposite implication, that I'm getting something out of this relationship. And that's why I'm doing it. There are benefits for me. I find that when I counsel people, especially first-year married people, that the bulk of their arguments revolve around this arena of expectations. Unmet, unspoken expectations. I'm not aware of them, and we're fighting about them.
I just had a question. I guess I'm having a hard time following myself. I found our dating relationship to be a little harder than the marriage relationship in some ways.
Okay.
At working through some things, and also, I guess what I've seen is often boyfriends seem to be a lot more willing to help with things or to help serve the girl, whereas the stereotypical husband doesn't help at all.
Right.
So the only thing, what we'd say for marriage would be the good things that are applicable better in a marriage situation, intimacy and that kind of thing. So I guess it sounds like you seem to be using it more in negative sense, as far as like the boyfriends wouldn't help, the husbands would, or something. I guess.
No. Yeah, I think I was trying to say exactly what you said.
Okay.
Is that it's easier to do those things when we're dating,
Okay.
harder when we're married.
Okay.
And it's harder because we've introduced this higher level of expectation,
Okay.
as opposed to the posture of I want to do this for you. And maybe the motivation isn't pure in the boyfriend-girlfriend state. You know, I'm trying to win you, so I'm my best behavior. Now that I've won you, don't have to. Yeah, so that's exactly what I was trying to say, is what you expressed. Yeah. Here comes the clarifier.
The clarifier.
And they gave me a microphone. Feel so official. I think when we talk about expectations, there's a lot of different things that go into it. And the way I think sometimes when I read our material, we come across as you should have no expectation. And that's not necessarily what we're saying. I think you should expect to be treated with respect. There's expectations that just you as a person, when you interact with other people, are healthy, and you should demand those things from anyone you interact with. You're not a doormat, and you don't allow people to treat you poorly. But expectations of, now I'm your wife, and so all of your free time should be all about me. And, you know, like you meet people that when they're first married, that's a lot of the arguments are over expectations of I've had in my head this idea of now I will live in romantic bliss for forever. We had a couple, okay, granted they got married really young, but she really thought they would have a candlelight dinner every evening. And she had this whole picture, and he wanted to play basketball with his friends, you know, kind of a thing. And there was this constant conflict. So those kind of expectations, you have to stop and go, are my expectations realistic? Or are they truly realistic ones that I need to demand be met? But I think where you can decide is if you go back to what we talked about last night. Are your expectations for this person things that should be being met by your relationship with Christ? Or am I looking for in an unhealthy way, my identity and security here? So I'm putting so much pressure on all of my needs now being met within my marriage. And most marriages aren't going to withstand that kind of pressure. But if my needs are being met by Christ, I can let go of some of those expectations that sometimes create constant conflict. I think it might be helpful to give specific examples of expectations. I'm trying to think back. It's been, you know, I had to go back over 30 years to think of when we were first married, because I'm sure I had really unrealistic expectations of when we were first married. But I think you do walk in with notions of what married life will be like, and then there's that rude awakening of this is not exactly what I pictured, just because it's real now. Did that clarify at all, or am I just, that didn't really? I'm not getting any feedback here.
Well, you know, this is the challenge of speaking. I was tracking a different way, but that's okay.
Oh, okay.
We should have a huddle, kiss. Right.
But just the silly expectations about like how I would cook certain food, or are you gonna be the one to put the laundry away, can create actual constant rubbing the wrong way that adds up over time until you're just always irritated with one another and can't even figure out why. And so those kind of expectations add up. Even just little ones.
Well, maybe 2 silly stories will help, and from our early years. And again, expectations there's a broad spectrum of expectations. But when we first got married, I remember one Saturday morning in our apartment in Santa Barbara, Kelly was making breakfast for me. And she brought the plate over to me and put it in front of me, and I went, "What's that?" Didn't go over well. Fortunately for me, she didn't slap me. I probably deserved it. And I knew what they were. It wasn't that I was ignorant as to what she put in front of me. I knew what it was. It was a plate of eggs. But what was coming out of me was this sense of expectation. My mom cooked scrambled eggs by cracking the egg into the frying pan, letting the whites white up a little bit, and then taking a fork and just kind of mixing them together. So what you got was what looked more like a soft-boiled egg kind of mixed together. And, you could, again, put it to whatever hardness. Kelly's mom made eggs by cracking the eggs into a bowl, and they poured milk in there. Now, I noticed when we were at Aaron's the other day, he uses water, but some sort of, additive to the milk, and then whisking it all together and making it yellow and throwing it into the pan, and then you get this yellow mixture. There's no white and yellow, it's just yellow.
Okay, so that is just
My way's right. So, what I was saying essentially was, what came out of that was the expectation that you will cook like my mother cooks, right? And what's this? Was the retort that I had. Another time in that same apartment, I asked Kelly, "Where's my white shirt?" And she said, "Where'd you put it?" And I was like, "What do you mean, where'd I put it? Where's my white shirt?" So the expectation, again, my mother's old school. She was a stay-at-home mom, old school. She did all of our laundry. If I asked my mom, "Where's my shirt?" she knew exactly where it was. And then would say, "Would you like me to iron it for you?" Right? And so I had in my head this expectation that she would. Now, if we had a conversation about these things, I might not have said, "Oh yeah, I want you to do my laundry, iron my shirts, and make sure you keep track of all my stuff so that I know where it is. And if I don't know where it is, then I can just appeal to you and you'll know where it is. That's what I need you to." I probably would have never verbalized any of that, but I had this expectation that she would do those things. All of you have been trained in marriage, so those role kinds of identity things, the things that your mom did, maybe your dad was very mechanical, he always fixed the cars, but your husband couldn't find a wrench if his life depended on it, and now you have to pay for a mechanic, and it's like, well, my dad fixed the cars himself, and we didn't have to pay this, and it's like $500. Why can't you do it? You might have that sort of expectation. Now, those are kind of surface, silly things, but really they aren't. I'll have to tell you, I've had people in my office, and it's a mystery to me, and we'll talk more in depth about this later, but it's a mystery to me how people can go from the altar, starry-eyed, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, I can't think of anybody but you, to having to get between a couple because he's gotten up out of his chair and trying to get his hands around her neck in my office. How did that happen? Because they were at that altar 15 years before. How did they get to that point? And the issue on the table at the moment when that happened was she wrote a $40 check that he didn't know about. So, I didn't turn my ringer off.
That's his phone. He's yelling at him in Russian. He can't understand.
Aye. So, expectations, even small expectations, little things, really affect how we interact with one another and affect even how we engage with one another, how we view one another, and really can become the downfall of your marriage if they're not ironed out and fixed up.
I think partially because this sounds so silly, but part of the reason is because you interpret that as if they cared about me, they would do this. So it's not that I care so much that you didn't take the trash out that morning. It's you're ignoring my needs, you're ignoring me. It somehow becomes a personal affront, and then it adds up.
Yeah. So I'm going to eventually get to the place where we talk about what's the reasonable place of expectations. And I don't think you can totally dismiss them, but I think there's a process that we go through first of adjustment. And I think the bigger adjustment is the pulling back from expectations. And then later on, we apply discernment to say, okay, in this instance, I have a reasonable expectation that my wife would behave this way, and so we can address that. But let's just move all the way back to the extreme and start with maybe an extreme example, and then we'll kind of crawl our way back to reasonable expectations. Okay? I do this because it's very similar to a coaching style that I have with kids. I coached soccer for many years, and there's a certain kid who's a little hesitant. You know, you have very aggressive kids. They're actually the easier ones to coach because you can it's easier to adjust aggression than it is to actually promote it. And in soccer, to be successful, you need a certain level of aggression. You know, you can't say, well, it's your turn. Go ahead and take the ball. You know, that just doesn't work in soccer. So there were some kids that I would say, you need to get a yellow card today. That's what I need you to do. I need you to have a yellow card at some point today. Because what I was trying to communicate to them is, you need to play a little more aggressively, on the edge. You need to make the ref mad that you're too aggressive, so he throws you a card. That's what I want you to do. Now, I knew full well he would never do it. So part of why I start here is that I know full well the harder thing for us to do, and probably the more difficult thing for us to do, is totally release expectations. So I'll make an extreme statement here. Stop expecting anything from your spouse. That's the best place to start. So as a male, I started figuring out this is the best attitude for me to take, is that I would view myself as a single person when it came to my obligations in the home, kind of like with chores and things to do around the house. I'm going to view myself as a single person. Part of this came from early years of counseling, where I'd have people come into my office and I'd hear these ridiculous complaints. You've actually come into my office for counseling, and here's the reason you're here, is every time I come home from work, there's a pile of laundry on the bed, and I can't get my wife to do the laundry. And I'm going, and you're in my office now asking me how to resolve this? Why don't you just do the laundry? Wouldn't that have been easier than to come to my office? Didn't it take more effort to come to my office and share that with me than just to go do the laundry yourself? It just was like, this is mind-boggling to me. And I thought, Jesus, the power of expectations is this strong. It'll pull someone into my office for something very silly. So I just began to say, you know what? I'm just going to start looking at my life this way. I'm single. If I were single, driving home from work, I would have to think about my own dinner. When I get home, I'm going to have to make dinner. And I'm going to have to clean the house. And I'm going to have to do my laundry so that I'm ready to go to work in the morning. All of those things are my responsibility. When we had kids, I'm the one who needs to discipline the kids. If they act out in public, it's my job to do it. If they need a diaper change, I need to change it. Whatever my kids need, if I'm a single father, I would have to do all of that. So I'm just going to take that as my posture and my attitude, that I'm going to do everything. It's a servant's attitude, right? I'm going to serve my family. I'm going to serve my wife. So it's just a total switch, because listen, I tell you this, if you've got this in your mind as a male, I'll just speak from the male, you females are smart enough to adjust this and flip it. If I'm driving home and what I've got in my head is, man, I'm hungry, I wonder what she's got cooking for dinner. And when I get home and she says, I've had a nuts day. The kids have been screaming, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and I haven't even thought about dinner. And I go, I've been working all day, and I'm hungry, and it's your job to make dinner. Why isn't there no dinner? Now, that's obviously, I'm going to walk through that in my head as an extreme statement, but there might even be just that little knuckle that comes in there that says, really? I'm hungry. Why isn't there any dinner? This is the kind of thing that subtly over time just totally erodes your relationship. This small little expectation. So when there's no dinner and I come home and I've already said to myself, what am I going to make for dinner? Just roll. Go make dinner. If I come home and this is the attitude I have, I've got to make dinner. I've got to, bathe the kids or do whatever. And I come home and she's had a non-crazy day and she's done those things. And I just go, I can check that off my list. I can check that off my list. Thank you. Thanks for dinner. Thanks for taking care of the kids. I don't have to do that now. And I begin to establish a posture that says, wow, this is great. It's great to have a spouse who does these things. And so I eliminate kind of this high level of expectation, especially over silly little things, and I introduce into this posture a mindset of servanthood, that I'm going to do everything because I'm going to function as if I were single. And you know, if I keep up this demanding posture, I'm going to be single anyway. So, might as well just start now so that I can enjoy the benefits of not being single. Now, I think this is a great posture to put into your head. I'm coming home to serve. I'm not coming home to be served. And then whenever there's reciprocation, because we're in this together, I didn't marry a slouch. I married someone who's got the same posture as I do. Then there's this high level of reciprocation that happens, this high level of trust that's encouraged. And it's like, wow, this is actually pretty good. I love baseball. I see myself as that old guy, you know, down the right field line with a scorebook and a pencil. I mean, I love to keep score. I love that whole process. I love how it's all mathematically consistent, correct. And if you do it right, you can prove a scorebook. And it's marvelous. It's a great thing. I love that. But that's not, you can't do that at home. You can't keep score at home. See, it's like, I did dinner last night. I did the laundry, you know, I did. If you start doing that, keeping score, you're in trouble. The other way I think you can picture this no rights, only responsibilities issue is to talk about percentages. So people talk about marriage as a 50-50 relationship. And I call BS on that. That's a load of hooey. Because it undermines this whole Philippians 2 prospect or perspective. It says there's no servanthood in that. It's just a measurement of labor. And I'm going to work to this point, and then I'm going to stop because I've done my part. You haven't done yours. So I throw this scenario out to a lot of people as well. If you had an accident in the home where one of you lost function, quadriplegic, would you serve your spouse at that point? Would you just kick in and do everything, or would you bail? And I think that's another picture. It's like this is what love requires me to do. This is what it requires me to do. Even for someone who's able, I'm going to do what the constraints of love does. And if Jesus is our picture, there's no 50-50. There's no 50-50 on the cross. You can't pull that off that equation. You can't see that as the notion of the posture of Jesus. I think that's the starting place. I think that's where we want to kind of the default starting position. And then, as Kelly mentioned, we're not trying to excise all reasonable expectation from a relationship. I just want to get to a starting place so I can start seeing myself as a servant. And then as a healthy person, if I'm going to go all the way back to that, I do stick up for myself. And so if there's an abusive or a dysfunctional context that's going on, obviously this 100% thing is best when it's ideal, but when both healthy partners are putting in 100%. But sometimes that doesn't always work. Even with healthy people, we mess up. And so there's a certain level of expectation that I should have, and then I stick up for myself. But we'll start talking about that more when we talk about communication. Because now that we're going to talk about how we kind of infuse ourselves in marriage as a default position, and then some of the different adjustments that we would make after the fact. And our communication would have a lot to do with that. So.
I think just kind of a summary, he sort of touched on this, but to summarize, is if you approach this like you're let me do the flip. If you come in with expectations about things like, which we all have, laundry or this, or giving me the car when there's no gas, or, whatever those kind of things are, and you're keeping track, your home has a constant feeling of discontentment, irritability, and tension that's just underlying, that's there. That's hard to get rid of because always there will be those irritations, they just will be. And if you have the attitude of, I'll just do it all, and then I'm just grateful because he'll end up doing a lot, or I'll end up doing stuff, your home has this attitude of gratefulness and appreciation for your spouse. And it's all in your head. The exact same work is being done by both of you, but one of them leads you to a place of discontent, and one of them leads you to a place of gratitude. And it's all in your mindset. It's not any different. If he's very helpful and he's a great cook and he'll do things, but if I'm actually keeping track, I can still, even with all of that, be discontented and kind of have that become my fallback position. And if I'm always feeling like, I've had a crazy day and now I still need to make dinner because I always feel responsible for it. And he'll come in and go, I'm gonna, defrost some fish and do this. And I'm like, whew, and there's this feeling of gratitude. And the work we've done isn't any different. All that's different is how we viewed it. You're grateful when those things happen, or you're keeping track and you're discontent. And it is up to you. Which spot do you want to live in? Do you want to live in tension and discontentment and always picking at your spouse? Or do you want to live in contentment and gratitude and enjoy the time you have together? And it's in your head and you get to decide.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of this posture is, number one, it works. I mean, it just works. It's just actually functionally easier over the long haul. It takes advantage of the two are better than one. So it's much better practically. It's also much better ideally. This is the biblical model. This is the example of Christ. So I become more like Christ in this posture as well. So it's a both and, not an either or. The other way just is totally contrary to this. Some people are fortunate enough to have that kind of partnership and they just work together well. I think there's sometimes where that happens and we mistakenly call that the ideal relationship, where it seems to happen naturally. There's a small percentage of people where that just kind of happens. You probably are getting two people who are, not lackadaisical. Well, they're healthy, but they're also not demanding. And that's not necessarily everybody. We all have different personalities. Some of us are drivers. Some of us aren't drivers. Some of us, have different. You can go all over the place with the different personality kinds of things. And when you get two easy types together or non-demanding types together, I think there may appear to be, oh wow, why they've got it so easy. I'm not sure it's true, number one, but it just on the surface appears to be that way. When you have two drivers in a relationship, then you might have more conflict. And so, there's lots of factors that go into it, but overall, I think this posture is practically better and ideally better for any personality type. And so that's kind of
And going back to what we said last night, this is true for any relationship. Just throwing it out because you guys are all in a great church context. Expectations of friendships that other people in the church have the same tension and potential for conflict or for appreciation of one another in the body of Christ. Am I always looking for, nobody noticed that I wasn't, there on Sunday, or that I'm struggling with this, and you just sit and become discontent instead of noticing the positives. And that fallback, your expectations, again, can create, I'm going to come and serve and then be grateful when people meet my needs, or I'm going to come and expect to be served and be angry when I'm not. This is a life underneath in friendships and business and everything. Your expectations can dictate a large percentage of your contentment and happiness with your life as a whole.
So this is part of why we assigned this assignment to you last night. I don't know how far you got done. That's okay if you didn't get it all done. I really don't think you had enough time to do what I envisioned would be the best approach anyway, but I hope you got started on it at least. Because what we like to talk about at this point, or have this raised, just to throw this idea of expectations out, is that going hand in hand with this would be the whole conversation about communication. Because expectations are a reality. You all have them. And even taking this posture is not going to excise them from your heart, your mind, your relationship. They're just there. You have to manage them, you have to assess them, and you have to apply some discernment at this level to say, is this a reasonable expectation? Am I being offended at this point? And do I need to take a different step than just continuing to be the servant and doing this? And then how do I manage my emotions when I get to the point where I've been trying this over and over and over again, but I really feel I'm being taken advantage of? Because that's the danger that you feel as a servant. If I'm a servant, maybe somebody's going to take advantage of me. Maybe there's not going to be the reciprocation. Maybe I'm going to end up doing all the work. And, sometimes that happens. So how now do I adjust or address that in the relationship? And so we want to talk a little bit about communication. So hopefully what you did in that process, or began to do, was have some healthy communication about expectations and other things. And so that's what we're going to cover in our next session. So we'll take our break now, and we'll pick it up at about 1:45, and we'll talk about communication.